Chaudry. Kassim is the director of a consulting firm that advises on AI as it relates to marketing and customer lifecycle strategies. Before that, he held several CTO and other tech executive roles. And one of the really fascinating non-work items that I found in his bio is that he's a trained sommelier and also advises in that space. Kassim, it's a real pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Joseph. Thanks for having me.
I'd love to dive with you right into the topic of leadership. You have a highly accomplished career, Kassim, and I would like your reflection on what made you successful. What are some of the ingredients to the success you had? What do you think are some of the reasons why you got to the place where you are?
I believe in terms of management, I believe most management problems or issues are leadership issues. And if the leadership is doing the right things in the right way for the right reasons, I believe that the team or the group or the department of the company does well. Especially when things are going well. We talked a little bit about this previously. I think most people, or I would apply the 80-20 rule, that 80% of managers can do a good job when times are going well, when their products are selling, when their team is functioning. It's the 20% of the time when times are difficult that I think your leadership philosophy really comes out. Okay. How empathetic are you? Are you trying to build your team? Do you take responsibility for your actions? And do you give credit where credit is due? So some of the principles that I try to employ is always to make sure that if there are problems or failures or issues within the team, as the leader, I believe the leader needs to take ownership and responsibility of it and do whatever needs to be done to fix it without blaming or blame shifting or throwing somebody under the bus. I think that's really important. And taking responsibility for failures and then working together as a team to solve them as best you can with the customer or the end result in mind, making sure that you make the customer whole, whatever the issue is. And then on the other side, if things are going well and your team really performs well, making sure that you don't take the credit, but you highlight and celebrate the team members who did a good job.
I like that. So it really is adaptive leadership, right? Depending on how the situation is, you have to bring different skills or a different mindset to your leadership. I like this notion also of taking accountability and starting with yourself, right? Taking ownership and accepting that we all make mistakes in what we do. Tell me about how that learning came about. It sounds like it might be a potentially hard learning, or you might have seen someone else who did the opposite and it feels like the person's blaming. Talk to me about the experience that led to that as one of the top insights.
In one situation, there was a weekend activity that one of my companies was doing, and I had a team working on, one of my teammates working on it, and there were some issues that happened where the cutover, if you will, didn't occur. I didn't want to get into too many details to protect the guilty, but I wanted to. The end result was when Monday came around, what we had expected to get accomplished over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday didn't happen. So the next step was to do a postmortem. What happened? Okay. Why did it happen? How can we fix it? And that was the real learning where in the end, it really ends up being my fault because I was in charge. And if I didn't plan properly for that event and things didn't go well, I would need to make sure that next time that wouldn't happen. What I did do over the weekend is when I did realize things weren't going well, I jumped in and made myself available. I was actually on vacation that weekend, so that was one of the difficult situations there where my backup wasn't fully prepared to cover for me. So I would take that responsibility as well. So in the end, as a good manager or project manager, you want to make sure that ahead of you plan all the potential errors ahead of time. And then when you do present what happened, you take full responsibility
Yeah.
and make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah. And you said something that I think is really important there earlier on, to make the customer whole, to make sure that whatever we do is right by the customer, right? So if things go wrong, which can always happen, making sure that the customer or maybe other stakeholders are, the situation is mitigated for them.
Exactly. So in that case, where the customer did have to spend extra time or extra
Yeah.
effort, we made sure that we didn't charge them for the extra time that we need to spend,
Right.
or we gave them a discount, or in some cases, or in this case where we added extra time to the project
Yeah.
that wasn't built.
Yeah.
So even though what happened was in a sense inexcusable, things do happen, and once they happen, you have to basically take your lumps and do whatever you can to make it right and move forward.
Yeah. And it's always painful, right? I have not found a way to make this less painful. Making mistakes hurts, and
Yeah.
correcting
Yeah, I
them
think-
also does. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one has to stand up and say, yeah, it was me. I did it, and it won't happen again. And here's what I'm going to do right now to make it better.
Yeah.
And I think that engenders confidence in your team. I believe in standing behind my team 100%, especially if I've selected my team. Sometimes you get teammates on your team that you don't have,
Right.
that you haven't chosen, and you may or may not want to have on your team, or you may or may not work very well with. And in that case, you really have to spend some time figuring out how you can work together,
Yeah.
and what your
Yep.
must-haves are and what their must-haves are, and try to make sure that those can mesh as best you can.
Yeah. Now, a lot of our learning, a lot of our growth comes from other people. What we see other people do, what other people tell us, advice we get. Tell me a little bit about some of the things you've picked up from other people, from your mentors, trusted advisors, or other people in your circles. What was some advice? What was some input that you received from them that really stuck with you, that was important to you, that changed the way you lead or the way you look at your teams?
Yeah, that's a really good example. My previous manager, who I worked with most recently, one of the really insightful things I learned from him was, even when you are on the right side of the issue, and you're the person you're working with or negotiating with or trying to resolve an issue with may be completely wrong or being unreasonable, I found that his approach was very flexible and bendable. So he would bend but not break. He wouldn't necessarily, where he saw an opening where he could have attacked and said, you were wrong there, or these are the bad things you did incorrectly and we solved them for you. He didn't go for that parry. He parried. Basically, he didn't go for the attack that he could have, and he kept those arrows in his quiver for later. And he stayed very, very diplomatic. And I thought that was such a masterclass in good negotiation, where you don't necessarily put all your cards down. You don't go in guns blazing. You try to soften the atmosphere and lessen the tension, and then bring out your points one at a time. And if the time isn't right, you hold back some of the things that you know would bolster your point and make them maybe look bad or hurt their position, but you don't use all your ammunition. And I thought that was very insightful, and I told him that afterwards. I said, I thought you could have really nailed them, but you chose not to. And he said, yes, because we are going to need to work with them again and on other projects and in other situations. So to basically rub their nose in it now will hurt us later. And I thought that was a really good way of approaching a really difficult negotiation.
That's not an easy thing to do. My word, right? It's sometimes so tempting to go for what seems like an easy win or an easy way of being right. with something.
Exactly.
And my sense is a lot of technologists are in that mindset of looking for what is right and what is wrong. And if we have an opportunity to point out what is wrong, great, right? It's an opportunity for feedback or something like that. And it's not always helpful, as you described.
Yeah, exactly. I think we, as humans, we have the two sides. We have the emotional side and the logical side. And most of technologists tend to be very logical and fact focused. So when they want to make their point, they're just going to make their point because these are facts. This is logical. However, they don't take into consideration the manner in which those points are conveyed. Right? You could say it in a way that says, "Oh, I believe this is how it works," rather than "This is how it works and you're wrong." Right? It's so I think that's what I really learned from him. It wasn't necessarily he was making the point. He was right, and those were the facts. But the manner in which he presented them was very neutral and not judgmental or offensive. Not offensive as in being rude, but offensive as in going on the offensive. Like, and so I thought that was something that I feel like I could learn very well because I tend to be very much fact, and if something is wrong or is wrong, you just instinctively you say no, that's not right. It's not blue, it's red, right? And you're like, no, obviously it's not blue, and so you can say, well, maybe it's purple, and then kind of come in between, right? Something like that. All right, maybe it looks purple to you, but it looks blue to me, or something to that effect, where you're right, but you don't feel like you have to make that point. And I think that's
I love
part
it.
of it.
It's a great example. It's a great example. And it really goes to show that sometimes being right is just overrated. Because
That's a great point. Yeah.
we want an outcome in many cases, or we want to work together, right? Or we want to have a goal in common, and whether we're right on something or not.
Yeah, sometimes you have to let it go and leave it, and then let the other person get to that conclusion on their own. Yeah. And I think I've done that many times where I've said, okay, this is the right answer, and they're like, no, it's not like that, and I was like, okay, here's the evidence, but if you don't agree, that's fine. And then later on, oh, yeah, you were right when you said that. So it was like, you don't have to beat your own drum, but let it go, and then let them get there themselves.
Yeah. Good. So great examples about the past in your leadership journey. I'd like to take a look at today now. So Kassim, when you look at where you are today, and highly accomplished, you've reached a great point, and at the same time, there's probably a next level. There's probably another step. So I'd be curious to know, if you look at your leadership at the moment, what's an area where you would like to work on? What's an area where you feel like, I'm doing well there, and there's maybe another level. There's more that I can do. What's something that you would want to focus on?
Yeah, I think the last point I made primarily is to be able to stay even keeled. I think that's something that tends to be, I think that's underrated, maybe, at least in my case. A lot of times people tend to have high highs and low lows, right? When things are going really well, it's like, yeah, let's go. You tend to take everybody out for dinner, you have a great time, and you give them awards or whatever. But then when things are rough, then everybody's down in the dumps, and you're like, nose to the grindstone. To be able to maintain an even keel, both in terms of when things are good and when things are bad, but also when things are difficult, when they're challenging, when you're butting heads with your peers, superiors, or people that you're working with, and how to diffuse the situation and really find common ground and say, okay, let's take a break. We've gotten to an impasse. Let's table the conversation for now. Let's work on a couple of other things. We have other issues, and then let's revisit this maybe tomorrow. And a lot of times you'll find that sleeping on things makes makes them appear different the next day. So I've noticed that as well. That's one thing maybe I could work on is being more even keeled and trying to go ahead.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, I was just saying. I think that's a leadership quality that I find very
Okay.
inspiring. And the other, the second one I wanted to. So those are two main points. The first one is to have that good balance between logical and emotional, between highs and lows. And then the other would be to really focus on where the industry is going, where the market is going, based on whatever field you're in. And a lot of times it's very difficult because what you really need to do is you need to be thinking one or two steps ahead. You can think one step ahead, but thinking two or three steps ahead is the hard part. And sometimes people even miss step one. And even though there's a lot of stuff going on, AI is a great example, ML, the chips, how they're falling. How one of the things that I think a lot of companies missed when I was in the storage business, when I first started in the storage business, I figured storage is never going to go away, because as soon as we build a bigger hard drive, we put more things on it, right? First it was just text, then it became pictures, then it became video, then it became songs, and then it became video. So I figured things are just going to get bigger and bigger. But then once the cloud came, in a sense, storage disappeared. Physical storage in massive data centers kind of disappeared, just like in the telecom business. You used to have these massive buildings with switches that were huge, mechanical switches. You had floors and floors of switches, and then when those things all became digitized in the 80s, 90s, suddenly all those data centers, or those centers, buildings that had no windows but just air conditioning and machines, were all shrunk down 1/100th the size that they were. And if you didn't see that coming, or didn't take that into account, you were going to be left behind.
You're left behind, absolutely. What do you say? That makes me think of my first computer, Commodore 64. 64 kilobyte of hard drive, right? And I had no idea what to put onto that hard drive because it was so massive. And now it couldn't even take one picture. It's just so amazing.
Back in 85 or 86, when
that sounds about right.
The Mac SE came out, it had 1 meg of RAM, and it was called the Fat Mac. Because it had 1 megabyte of RAM. It was like huge. And and now I think our phones are mini supercomputers compared to back then.
Exactly. Yeah. Let me ask you one more question, and then we'll wrap it up, Kassim. I'd be curious to know, what is an insight that you have into leadership where you think many other people are missing it? So when you look at peers, you look at colleagues in other organizations, and you get the sense they're not seeing something. There's something that they're missing, and it seems clear to you. What might that be?
A number of things come to mind, but let me just throw out one item. And I think it's not, I don't want it to come across as jaded or cynical, but I think it's important. It's something that you gain over time, like you and me, after you've worked in the industry for a while, is that work is there for work, and it's not there for it's not your personal hobby, right? It's something that you need to do in a professional manner. It's not there to stroke your ego. It's not there for you to get your fulfillment. People, I feel lately, at least, work has become way more than it needs to be. I think your family, your friends, your hobbies outside of work need to give you that fulfillment, and you shouldn't expect work to give you that affirmation and fulfillment. Yeah, special interest groups are great. You You have affinity groups at work
Yeah.
that hey, we're interested in, I don't know, drones, or we're interested in this particular technology, or whatever, or philosophy, whatever. It's great to have different interest groups, but I feel like since what's happened over time is that instead of 9 to 5, we work longer hours. We have email, we have phones, and we work weekends. Work has consumed so much more of our time. It also has consumed more of our emotion or our well-being, and we put too much emphasis on that, and don't separate ourselves enough from, like, we become our work, and I think we need to be an integral part of wherever we work, for sure, but we also need to be our own individual and not expect work to give us more than it can, and then be disappointed and say, oh, I don't think this work is fulfilling enough. Well, it's supposed to help you technically get somewhere and to improve and to make things better for other people and for your customers and for your coworkers. But beyond that, I think it should be work and then life. And I think that work-life balance is one thing we've lost.
Interesting. I'm always a big fan of sort of counterintuitive or counter trend thoughts, and that is definitely one, right? Because the trend is going in the other direction of looking for meaning in work, finding purpose in work, and so on. And maybe it's not going in the right direction because it really doesn't serve that for many people, despite the fact
I think
that they're looking for it.
I think it shouldn't be just, oh, I work 9 to 5 and then I'm done. I don't care. I think that's the other extreme. The current extreme, I feel, is like, you live at work. You'll have a couch, and you'll take a nap, and then you'll go back to work. And you know, it's just like you bring your food in and you're working. And I think that is I think emotionally draining, and I think it's over time, I think it's harmful.
Yeah, and it might be too high of an expectation, right? I don't have to find the purpose in the company that I'm working for.
And I think it's both ways, right? I think the companies are demanding a little too much from people, and I think people are likewise companies are demanding time and energy, and then because you're spending so much time and energy there, people are expecting more than just a paycheck and a promotion and a bonus. They're expecting fulfillment, and they're expecting almost the company to be their parent, in a sense, or
I like that.
Sibling, rather than just being
an employer, right? Or being Kassim, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your insight on leadership. Many ideas that I really, really liked. The last one, a little bit counterintuitive. I think that's always the salt in the soup. I'll also remember the adaptive leadership, the 80-20 rule, the Pareto rule you had on leadership, taking the ownership, and many other thoughts there. Thank you so much for being with us today, Kassim.
Take care. Have a good day.
For everyone else out there, please remember to like and subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you again for the next episode in the Top Innovator Series. And until then, make sure to keep your brain cells active.